Wars are won and lost in campaigns, not in single battles. A general may win every engagement and still lose the war. The British won most of their battles in the American Revolution and lost the conflict. The Germans destroyed entire Soviet armies in 1941 and failed to force a decision. The United States killed enemy fighters at staggering ratios in Vietnam and withdrew in defeat. What connects these failures? The absence of a bridge between winning fights and winning wars. Strategy answers the question, why do we fight? Tactics answers, how do we win this engagement? But neither answers the question that lies between them. How do we arrange our forces, our movements, our battles, and our logistics into a campaign that translates tactical action into strategic success? That question is the domain of operational art. As the Soviet theorist Alexander Svechin put it, tactics make the steps from which operational leaps are assembled. Strategy points out the path. This is the story of how that idea was born, how its creators were murdered, and how its principles endure. Operational art could not exist before Napoleon. Before 1800, armies were small, expensive, and slow, tethered to fixed supply depots and unable to communicate faster than a man on horseback. A single commander could oversee an entire campaign in person. Then the French Revolution changed everything. The Levée en masse put over 750,000 men under arms, armies too large for one mind to control or one supply train to feed. Napoleon's answer was the corps system. Each corps, 16 to 30,000 men, carried its own infantry, cavalry, artillery, and staff. Each could march and fight independently for 24 hours. Multiple corps advanced on separate but converging routes, spread across 50 to 100 kilometers, each within a day's march of at least one other. The Ulm campaign of 1805 is the purest expression. 200,000 men in 7 columns swing through Franconia, cross the Danube east of Ulm, and cut General Mack's line of retreat. 27,000 Austrians surrender without a decisive battle. French casualties, fewer than 2,000. This is operational art before the term exists. But Napoleon cannot institutionalize it. Those methods live in his head and nowhere else. His marshals are trained as executors, not independent operational thinkers. When the theater grows too large for one mind, the system breaks. Napoleon's art dies with him. The Prussians learn from Napoleon's destruction what Napoleon himself could not teach, that operational thinking must be an organizational output, not the product of individual genius. Scharnhorst opens the officer corps to talent regardless of birth and rebuilds the general staff from a bureaucratic appendage into the intellectual engine of the army. Moltke the Elder takes command of that engine in 1857 and gives it a central concept: march divided, fight united. Railroad and telegraph extend the operational reach across continental distances. Mission-type orders Auftragstaktik specify the objective and scheme of maneuver but leave execution to the commander on the spot. Königgrätz, 1866. 3 Prussian armies converge from a 270-mile arc across Bohemia, coordinated by telegraph. The Austrian army loses 40,000 men. Austria sues for peace within 3 weeks. Sedan, 1870. 104,000 French soldiers surrender, including Napoleon III. Sedan becomes the operational model that European armies study and attempt to replicate for the next 4 decades. Then Schlieffen takes it too far. His plan for a massive wheeling movement through Belgium 600 kilometers in 6 weeks is so rigid it cannot survive contact with reality. The Marne, September 1914, proves that technology, the machine gun, barbed wire, massed artillery, has temporarily defeated operational art. 4 years of stalemate follow. Moscow, the 1920s. Out of the carnage of the Civil War and the humiliation of the failed drive on Warsaw, a handful of Soviet officers produced the most original military theory since Clausewitz. Alexander Svechin, a former Tsarist general now serving the Red Army, coins the term Operativnoye ISS Kustvo, operational art. He publishes Strategy in 1926, the first systematic attempt to define the space between strategy and tactics as a distinct domain of military thought. Vladimir Triandafilov provides the mathematics. His 1929 work, The Character of Operations of Modern Armies, defines the modern operation as a mosaic of battles distributed in space and time but unified by aim. He calculates the force ratios, the depths of advance, the logistics required for breakthrough and exploitation. Mikhail Tukhachevsky, Deputy People's Commissar for Defense, designs the deep operation. Simultaneous attacks smash through the entire tactical depth. A mechanized exploitation echelon drives 40 to 50 kilometers per day into the operational rear. Airborne forces seize key positions behind enemy lines. Air strikes interdict reserves and supply. The 1936 field regulations formalize the doctrine. It is brilliant. It is decades ahead of anything in the West. Then Stalin's purges destroy it all. Tukhachevsky is dragged from his post, tortured into confession, and shot in a basement on the 11th of June, 1937. The bloodstains of his confession, mixed with his own blood, were found on the documents decades later. Svechin is arrested and executed in August 1938. Triandafilov was already dead, killed at 37 in a plane crash in 1931, before the purges could claim him. 3 of 5 marshals, 13 of 15 army commanders, 50 of 57 corps commanders. Shot, imprisoned, erased. The doctrine survived. Its creators did not. The Second World War becomes history's greatest laboratory of operational art. May 1940. Fall-Gelb the Ziekelschnitt. While Army Group B attacks into Belgium as a feint, drawing the Allied mobile reserves north, Guderian's panzers crash through the supposedly impassable Ardennes. They cross the Meuse at Sedan on the 13th of May and drive 200 kilometers to the Channel coast at Abbeville in 8 days. The Allied armies are cut in two. France falls in 6 weeks. It is the most stunning operational achievement of the 20th century. But operational brilliance without strategy is empty. Germany wins France and still loses the war. Meanwhile, the Red Army relearns the doctrine of its murdered theorists through catastrophic losses. 3 million Soviet soldiers are killed, wounded, or captured in the first 6 months of Barbarossa. Yet from that abyss comes recovery. Stalingrad, November 1942, Operation Uranus. 3 Soviet fronts strike the weak Romanian armies on the flanks. The pincers meet at Kaluk. 290,000 Axis soldiers are encircled. Deep operations doctrine, rediscovered, refined, and applied at scale. Kursk, 1943, deliberate defense absorbs the German offensive, then launches a devastating counterattack. Then Bagration, June 1944. 2.4 million Soviet soldiers, 5,000 tanks, massive deception, 4 fronts attacking simultaneously across a 700-kilometer front. 28 German divisions are destroyed. Army Group Center ceases to exist. A German staff officer on the receiving end wrote, "The Russians simply crushed Army Group Center and battered it to death." The Eastern Front proved what the murdered theorists had argued: winning a battle is of little consolation if you lose the campaign. August 1945. The most perfect operational level campaign in history. Stalin orders the destruction of Japan's Kwantung Army, 700,000 strong, spread across Manchuria. Marshal Vasilevsky designs a triple envelopment across a 3,000-mile front. 1.5 million Soviet troops, 5,500 tanks, 26,000 guns. 3 fronts striking simultaneously from 3 directions. The Transbaikal Front crosses the Gobi Desert and the Greater Hingan Mountains, terrain the Japanese considered impassable. Pleyev's cavalry mechanized group advances 55 miles on day 1 across the Mongolian steppe. The first Far Eastern Front attacks from Vladivostok. The second Far Eastern Front strikes from the Amur River. Surprise. Speed. Depth. terrain the defender thought would protect him. The Kwantung Army shatters in 11 days. 600,000 Japanese soldiers surrender. Soviet casualties, 36,000. Everything the murdered theorists of the 1930s had envisioned: breakthrough, exploitation, simultaneous multi-axis attack, mechanized forces driving through impossible terrain executed at full scale, 20 years after their deaths. Deep operations doctrine, fully realized. Vietnam breaks the American military's confidence. The United States had concentrated on fighting battles rather than waging war, resting on the flawed assumption that killing enough enemy fighters would translate into strategic success. It did not. The profession enters a crisis of identity. The 1973 Yom Kippur War delivers a second shock. Modern anti-tank missiles and surface-to-air missiles shatter assumptions about battlefield survivability. General William Dupuy responds with active defense, the 1976 FM 100-5. It is criticized as too tactical, too reactive, a doctrine for losing slowly. Then General Don Starry develops the extended battlefield concept, and in 1982 the Army publishes a revised FM 100-5, Airland Battle. It is the first U.S. Army doctrine to use the term operational art. 4 tenets: initiative, agility, depth, synchronization. A year later, the School of Advanced Military Studies opens at Fort Leavenworth. Its graduates, called Jedi Knights, study Clausewitz, Svechin, Tukhachevsky, and the Great Campaigns. They recognize what the Soviets had known for 60 years, that there exists a level of war between tactics and strategy where campaigns are designed, sequenced, and sustained. The Americans finally build the bridge. 24th of February, 1991. The left hook, the largest flanking maneuver since the Second World War. 39 days of airstrikes have already degraded Iraqi command and control, shattered logistics, and reduced the fielded forces by 30 to 50%. While Marine forces and Arab coalition allies attack north into Kuwait as a fixing force, the 7th Corps and 18th Airborne Corps shift 200 miles west through open desert and sweep around the Iraqi right flank. Napoleon's maneuver Soleil derrière, executed at highway speeds with GPS navigation and precision-guided weapons. The 101st Airborne Division establishes a forward operating base 155 miles behind Iraqi lines in the largest helicopter assault in history. 100 hours. 86,000 prisoners. 3,700 tanks destroyed. At the Battle of 73 Easting, the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment engages Republican Guard T-72s at 3 to 4 kilometers. 85 Iraqi vehicles are destroyed in 23 minutes. American losses, 0. Airland battle doctrine, vindicated. The most one-sided operational victory in modern military history. But Saddam Hussein remains in power. The Shia uprising is crushed while American forces stand idle. Operational art had produced a flawless military victory. Strategy had produced an indeterminate result. The servant had forgotten the master. Iraq, 2003. 21 days to Baghdad, brilliant operational execution. Then nothing. No plan for what happens after the regime collapses. General Tommy Franks told the civilian leadership, "Keep Washington focused on policy and strategy, leave me the hell alone to run the war." He got his wish. He ran the war superbly. Nobody ran the peace. Afghanistan. 20 years of tactical actions without strategic coherence. The center of gravity was political, not military, and no campaign design, however sophisticated, could substitute for the political legitimacy that the Afghan government lacked. Hugh Strawn's warning cuts to the bone. The operational level of war, he wrote, was developed in a policy-free zone, and it expanded to fill the vacuum left by absent strategy. The selective use of history made matters worse. Western armies studied the German defeat of France in 1940 as a role model without noting the inconvenient ending. Strawn's verdict: the Germans defeated France but still lost the Second World War. It behoves the United States to remember that fact. Operational art is the link between winning fights and winning wars. When the link is severed from strategy, you win fights that do not matter. 3 enduring lessons emerge from 2 centuries of operational art. First, operational art is the servant of strategy. When the servant forgets the master, catastrophe follows. Napoleon in Russia, Germany in 1941, America in Vietnam and Iraq. The pattern is old and unforgiving. Second, logistics impose absolute limits. No campaign design can exceed the logistical capacity of the force that must execute it. Every breakthrough that outruns its supply lines culminates. Every encirclement that cannot be sustained collapses. Third, the enemy adapts. Every successful operational method will eventually be countered. The advantage flows to whichever side learns faster. Ukraine, 2022, proves that these principles survive the digital age. Russia failed in February not because operational art was obsolete, but because the Russian military violated its principles, dispersed forces across multiple axes, starved its logistics, broke its own command structure. The concepts endure. The instruments change. Wars are won and lost in campaigns, not in single battles. The officer who thinks only tactically will win battles and lose wars. The officer who thinks only strategically will make grand plans that cannot be executed. The officer who thinks operationally provides the essential link between the two.